Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Blount. I'm one of the pastors here at Heritage Church. In 2000, Heritage Church began its ministry, and then Pastor Jeff came along about 5 years after that, and Pastor Jeff has been with us for 15 years. So if you get a chance, maybe get online, send out a message to him, and thank him for all that he's doing in leadership. But that song, Walk on Water, I don't know about you, but it says, say the word, say the word. And we're going to look at some things today about this changes everything, encounters with Jesus. Because if you have an encounter personally with Jesus Christ, I guarantee you, if it's a true encounter with Jesus Christ, it will change your life radically. And so we're talking about this changes everything, encounters with Jesus. And this week is going to be a very interesting topic, because I don't know about you, we looked last week at the centurion soldier that really he just said, say the word, and that same phrase was in this song. But I don't know about you, but even if water is calm, I don't know about you, but it actually is not possible to walk on water. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, I can do it. Well, you name the date and the time, and I'm going to be there, and I want to watch that happen, because I'm going to tell you what, we're going to look at a guy today that walked on water here in just a little bit. But I want you to understand, wherever you are, you can actually just say the word. You can say the word, and that's exactly what we looked at last week, because there's a part of us, as this past week I had many people talk to me a little bit about last week's message about that illusion of being in control. And when we would acknowledge that we are not in control, that it's an illusion that we're in control, and then learn to trust Jesus, who is the one that's in control, of which we're going to find out again today, is our life is a whole lot better. From the standpoint, if you think about it, the size of your faith, actually we talked about last week, will determine the outcome of your life, the size of your faith. So how big is your God? I don't know how big your God is, and I do know this, that he has some great things for you. But we're going to take a look at Peter's life in a miracle that he actually was able to do. Now, I would say this, that God allowed him to do, because God is allowed in our lives to do amazing things when we just invite him to be a part of our lives and do some amazing things. Now, I want you to understand, Peter was a man that walked on water, and there's been nobody else, to my recollection, that has walked on water. Now, some of you might say, I walk on water every year here in the state of Michigan in the month of what? Maybe January or February. It's frozen. But we're going to take a look at somebody's faith and how he had a true encounter with Jesus Christ. And what we're going to talk about today is what one of the songs, as we just sang here just a little bit ago, talked about, was I dare you to move. I dare you to move. But before we do that, would you pray with me? Why don't you bow your heads? I'll lead us in a word of prayer. But I'm going to ask that you would pray as well, that God would show up in an unbelievable way, and that he would touch the hearts of those people that are here today with us, and then also online. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for what you're doing in and through our lives. Lord, I know that we may say, I dare you to move, and I don't really think you're daring us to move, but man, you're wanting us to move. You're wanting us to let go of what we're hanging on to, that we're putting our trust in. And maybe there's a little fear. Maybe we're clinging to something. I don't know. But I do know that you are in the midst of our lives, and you're initiating our lives, and you so want us to move. You want us to do some great things that you can do in and through and with our lives. And so, Lord, I'm asking for those who are online today, those that are here today, that you would speak to us in a mighty and powerful way. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So here's the thing I want you to think about a little bit. I dare you to move. I dare you to move is what we're talking about. Is there anybody in the house, and I can see, they got the lights just right so I can see it. Is there anybody in the house with a raised hand would say, man, I love the risk. I love taking a risk. Anybody, just be honest. Some of you guys, nobody likes taking a risk? Man, maybe I'm all right over here. I see a hand right over here. You're a risk taker? Risk taker? Good. Nobody else? Right there. Okay, just a few of you. Well, then maybe the rest of you don't like risking things, right? That's what we're going to talk a little bit about. Now, there's a real fine line there I want you to think about. When we're trusting the Lord, is it really a risk? Well, many of us would probably say, yeah, because why? I risk losing this, or if I give up this, or I let go, I'm going to risk losing what I have. Or if I go, I'm going to risk something else, you know. Maybe there's a long-term goal you have, but you're looking at some things a little different. But I want you to understand, so some of you like risk, some of you are not risk takers. And I want you to understand, some people that I've met in my life are risk takers, and they love the rush. And matter of fact, I truly believe there's going to be a couple of those people that are normally at our 11 o'clock service, and they'll be here, and they're going to be going, yeah. You know, they're probably the people that would do all kinds of things up on this high stuff up here. But I can tell you honestly that the rest of us fall somewhere in between there. You're a risk taker, or you're not a risk taker. We're kind of in the middle. Now, personally, I can tell you that I am somewhat of a risk taker, mostly when I was younger, when I wasn't maybe a little wiser. And I found it to be only when I was actually more of a follower at that time, or I was actually persuaded from the standpoint of what I should be doing. Like maybe on a dirt bike, and my cousin would say, man, let's just go climb the hills at Deanville Mountain. I'm like, dude, why would we climb a beautiful mountain like that has an overhang at the top, and it almost looks like that if you hit it, you would go backwards? Well, I'd watch him do it. Next thing I'm like, how did he do that? And then now he's at the top, and he's kind of waving, and I'm like, dude, I'm going to die. I'm the one that's going to die. Or we used to race enduros, and there would be things that you would cross and things of that nature. Had a great time. So most of the things that I took as a risk are a little bit maybe when I was younger and maybe not so smart. Now, I'm not smart. I'm just probably smart Alec. But my point is, some people have come and told me in some of the business groups that I've been a part of, they look at my vocation as a risk. Because really, for most of my career, I've been like 100% commission salesperson. Now, some people, that would just be like too risky. They would rather trade an hour for $1. They want to know what they're getting at the end of the week, and I get that. And I just have never been that way. So some people would say, like in investments in real estate, we're going to look a little bit at how big is the risk. Now, investments in real estate would be, if there's no risk at all, there's probably little return. But if there is a big risk in the investment, there's a possibility of a greater return. You see what I'm saying? So whether you're a risk taker or you're not, some of you know you fall somewhere in between, and some of you have risked some things and you've lost. Some of you have risked some things and you've lost. So we're going to take a little bit about that, because I want you to understand, here's most of the problem with big risk is usually the assessment of it. But if you look at smaller risk, it would be like, well, should I jump over the mud puddle that's only like 2 feet long, right? Or should I eat a jalapeno? Well, that's not a real big risk for some people. Well, how about a ghost pepper? Right? How about if I just bite into a ghost pepper? My son James likes to get hot sauce, so he brought some hot sauce home about a couple months ago, and one of them was like, it was just a dab, and it was like, I mean, your whole body just felt like it was on fire. So maybe you would do that. So there's a level of the assessment is, if it's not big, if it's smaller, then it's like it's not a real big deal. Like, guys, let me ask you a question. Here's a risky area right here. When your wife looks at you and she's got the garment on and she goes, you know what, honey, do I look fat in this? Look, you don't need to even think about that. The word is no. Just tell her no. And so my point is, I'm going to save you some problem there. You just tell her no. So you don't have to give any assessment to that, right? So hopefully we all understand that. Now, the bigger the risk, it's an interesting thing. It's a bigger risk. So from the standpoint, do I trust the person who has already done me wrong? Actually, what I would do is maybe, do I believe in my own self, and do I have what it takes? There's a little bit different assessment because you're looking at what you're getting ready to do or where you're getting ready to go, how you're going to handle something. Now, maybe it would be something, am I willing to trade a long-term benefit for a temporary drawback? Do I want to look at the long term, but I'm going to have to take a few steps back and then regroup and then actually do some things and move forward? So here's the thing. The most difficult choices that involve risk are the ones you have to make on the spot. You don't have time to think. It's just you on the spot. There's little or no time. And really what we're doing then is it's more of an instinct. It's an instinct. Or you may think about it from the standpoint of faith. Now, especially when those risky choices are decisions that you and I know as a follower of Jesus Christ that maybe God is nudging us in. Now you say, well, I'm not a follower of Jesus Christ. That's okay. But some of these principles that we look at today are for you. Now listen, I'm not your boss. I don't have any control over you. I don't have any power over you. But I believe what God is trying to tell us is He's trying to nudge us many times and make a move. So what I want to do today is, as the series is based on an idea that when a person actually has a true encounter with Jesus Christ, everything absolutely changes. And so the first couple weeks we are studying actually 5 people in 5 different circumstances and how it impacted their lives and how it applies to us and how we can take some things away from it. We remember the centurion soldier from the standpoint that he actually, what? He just said, say the word. Now remember, go back 2 weeks with the attitude of gratitude was what? The man that had leprosy, there were 10, but only 1 came back. Are you a person that has had an encounter with Jesus Christ that your attitude is, you're so thankful? You've met some of those people. So we need to understand whether it's the attitude of gratitude or the illusion of control. Today we're going to look at the Peter from the standpoint where we dare to make a move. So I dare you to move. And so, however, here's what I want us to catch. I'm really hoping and praying that when we go through the story of Peter when he walked on water, I'm hoping you catch this, and I've been asking the Lord to really speak to my heart over and over again, and your heart is this. It's not so much as what happened on the outside of Peter's life. It's really what happened on the inside. I believe that this is a turning point in Peter's life. I believe he had an encounter with Jesus so well that after that moment, yeah, I get it. He has done some things that many of us would say, oh, he just opens his mouth and inserts his foot. But I'm here to tell you, I truly believe that it's what happened on the inside of Peter. So we pick up in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14, verse 22, and he said, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. Now, I want you to understand something. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. He's telling them, get in the boat, and I'm going to go on ahead of him. He said, I want you to go on ahead of me and to the other side. That's a key in all of our lives. See, we have the storyline. You're going to go to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So I want you to understand, these guys had no earthly idea what was in store for them on the other side. But I want you to catch something. Jesus made them get in the boat. And I want you to go to the other side. Because there's times in all of our lives, what does he tell you? Go over here or stay here, or not yet. There's times in all of our lives where Jesus is initiating in our lives, and we need to listen to him. So he makes the disciples get into the boat, and after he had dismissed them, he went up into the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there all alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against them. Now, he knew the wind would be against them. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, okay? They were terrified. Oh, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. He said, don't be afraid. Now, Lord, if it's you, Peter speaks up and said, Lord, if it's you, that's a really important phrase right there. If it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Now remember, Jesus made them get in the boat to go to the other side, and many times in our lives that happens to us. But I want you to catch this because this is so important, and please remember this. This is kind of a takeaway for you today. Don't miss this. Peter says, if it's you. It's kind of a prerequisite. There's a doubt there. He's not quite sure. And can I ask you a question? Maybe where you are today, you're not quite sure. Now, I get it. We have the answers to how Jesus is with us at all times. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. We have these little phrases we'll say or verses we've memorized. But Peter says, if it's you, and it's very important, and we'll come back to that in a moment, but Jesus said what? Come. One word. Jesus spoke one word, and there's three observations I want us to take away from this in one word today is this. The first one is this. Jesus wants to take us places we would never go on our own. If we can catch this, that he's with us. Now remember, he said, if it's you, but this is key. When Jesus says come, he wants to initiate in our lives, and he wants to take us places that we would never go on our own. Now let's pick up in Matthew's gospel again, and let's see what happens in the story. He says, then Peter got down out of the boat. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm still hanging on to the boat many times in my life. How about you? Is there anything in your life in the midst of where you are? In your relationships? You're not getting out of the boat. We want to get out of it maybe, but we're not getting out of the boat to actually do what's getting ready to happen. And he walked on the water and came toward Jesus, but when he saw the wind, he was looking at Jesus, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Now, Jesus told him again, remember, we see the storyline, go to the other side. He knew full well that the wind would be up against him. But here's a truth that many times that you and I don't want to listen to. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to be reminded because we just want where we are in the midst of where we are. We want it to be done. But Jesus never promised, God never promised that Tom Blount would not have troubles in his life. He never promised me that I would not have storms. He never promised you that you would not have troubles if you followed him. He never promised that you would not be in the midst of a storm. And you would begin to see the waves, so to speak, the circumstances that surround you. He never promised that. But you know what he promised? He promised he would be there every step of the way with you. He did promise that. Jesus wants to take you and I to places that we would not go on our own. And so what I want you to understand, it's a very perfect place for Jesus to show up and do something amazing, because here's what I don't understand. And I like to read the word inquisitively or with imagination. What in the world is Jesus doing walking on the water at 3 o'clock in the morning? I kid you not, 2:35, I was wide awake this morning. Wide awake. And I'm laying in bed, I'm like, what? I mean, wide awake. It's not like one of those, we wake up groggy sometimes. I was wide awake. So I thought, well, I know I'm wide awake, but surely I'll fall back to sleep. No. 3:05, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'll get out of bed. So I went and read, studied, prayed for you, did some other work. I did a lot of other things, to be honest with you, because it seems like a full day's already gone by now. But I want you to understand, what's Jesus doing walking on the water at 3 a.m.? Now, Mark tells an interesting storyline and uses a different word that I want to bring to your attention. And he tells the same story, and he talks about Jesus, and it says that Jesus intended to pass them by. So Jesus is just walking on water going, I'll beat you over there, right? They're facing the wind. I don't know if he was trying to say, well, I'm better than you. I'm not saying that's what he's saying, but what's he doing at 3 o'clock in the morning walking on water? But the pass by is an interesting Greek word that that Mark uses here. And Mark chooses this word through the inspiration of God. And I want you to catch with the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It's a technical term for a theophany. You say, what in the world is a theophany? Well, it's a technical term that says this: those defining moments. Now listen to this. This is so key for you and me. Don't miss this. Those defining moments when God made striking and temporary appearances in the earthly realm to a select individual or a group for the purpose, listen to this, of communicating a message. Pretty big. Pretty big. Jesus knew what he was doing. Jesus knew what he was doing. So you give an example. You may remember this. When Moses was in the cleft of the rock, he was told that you'll be in the cleft of the rock so that what would happen is that while my glory passes by. Same idea. Elijah up on the mountain. It said that while he was up on the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by. I don't know where you're at right now, but I truly believe that Jesus Christ, many times in our lives, is somewhat passing us by means of this, initiating in our lives and trying to get our attention all the time. But we're so caught up in the winds and the wave, the circumstances that surround, that in each one of those, whether it was the burning bush or the wind and the fire or the walking on water, each one of those situations, God was doing what? He was calling the person. He was calling the person to do something extraordinary. And I believe this with all my heart. You're not here by chance. He is calling us to do something extraordinary right here in Imlay City. He's calling you to do something extraordinary in your vocation, because some of the people that you rub shoulders with, I'll never meet. And he's initiating in your life and in my life, and he's calling us to do something extraordinary. But it's kind of like this. He's not daring you to move, although that is the title of our message, but he just wants you to move. Almost like move in a little closer and listen to him. Every time a person says yes to a risk such as what we're talking about today, somewhat of a situation like this, I believe that we experience the power of God as never before. You see, my friends, it's the same with us. When God asks us to trust him, it involves some measure of risk. The risk is at its very essence where we learn to trust him. And with no measure of risk in some way, I want you to understand there's really no trust. If you think about that, if there's really no measure of risk, what is it that you got to trust him for? Let's just say your bank account never runs dry. Is it tough to trust Jesus for money? No. So I hope you're not trusting your work, because what if it was all gone? You see, if there's no measure of risk, is there really a trusting going on? I can honestly tell you it's not always about money, though. It's about our lives. And if you don't mind, I'll give you just a really quick personal experience. I could remember being married, couple kids, in the 90s, early 90s, singing gospel music, traveling about 11 different states, having a great time, working a lot. Sometimes we'd get on the coach on Friday late in the day so we could go sing on a Saturday afternoon concert. Sometimes we had a Friday concert, then a Saturday, then a Sunday morning, Sunday night, then we'd go back to work on Monday. So we had been working a lot, and we always tried to at least have one weekend a month at home. Sometimes we'd be gone on the road for about 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on what that weekend was for the month. We're up here in Imlay City. We're doing fine. Both have good jobs. We have 2 good kids. Well, I think we had one at that time, one good kid, but I'm just kidding you. They're both good. Neither one of them were going to know which one was it. And so we had good kids, good life, a couple cars, a house, lived next door to my in-laws. You're like, oh, God, that's a nightmare. It was great. They respected us. We respect them. Had a great time. We're up here in Imlay City on Clear Lake Road, north of town, about 7-8 miles. We're just having a good time. 4th of July weekend, 1995, and my uncle looks over at me and says, man, we don't have a pastor anymore. Why don't you come be our pastor? And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. And I was just joking when I said, yeah, have him call me. Tuesday, after the 4th of July weekend was done, I get a phone call. It's Reverend Crone on the phone. Next thing you know, fast forward, we had just bought an investment property. And we were redoing it and stuff like that. That's a long story there. But then I began to pray and fast and ask the Lord, Lord, if you're really serious about this, then you're going to have to show me something. Because you understand, any risk involved, you better believe it. We're leaving 2 good jobs and a nice place to come up here for $250 a week. Anybody want to sign up for that? Now, I'm not saying we're something. I would do mortgages all the way down to Monroe, Michigan, and work my way back up here as a bivocational pastor. God sold the house. We left it all. We came up here. The rest is history. I cannot imagine, listen to me, I cannot imagine if I didn't move. Because in essence, he dared me. I don't mean in the way of, oh, I dare you. You know what I'm saying? He initiated in our lives. Did I have to go? No. Would I still be a child of God? Absolutely. Would I still be blessed, favored, loved? Absolutely. But I cannot imagine if I hadn't moved here, I would never have met any of you. Sometimes in your life, God is nudging you and directing you, and you need to get a hold of him because Jesus wants to take you. He wants to take me to places we would never go without him. But also, there is no true greatness without taking a risk. You know that from doing business, or maybe your once true love, or maybe within your finances or sports, whatever it may be, but especially with faith. There is no true greatness without taking a risk. Now, personally, as I've gotten a little older, and some of you would relate to this, as you get a little older, we've all seen people and heard the stories about how people around us, and yourself included, have seen God do amazing things. Can you imagine if you didn't respond to his initiative in your life and move? And go where he wanted you to go. Do what he wanted you to do. You see, here's the deal. We've come to the idea and understand there's a great, amazing conclusion is this. God is bigger than any risk we would ever take when we trust him. So really, in essence, as I say all that, I want to go back and say this. Is there really any risk in trusting God? I'm going to say no. There really is not a risk when God is in it. And he loves you more than anything. But here's the thing. The storms of our lives, many times we don't recognize God's presence. We're afraid to step out by faith. We begin to look at the waves around us and the circumstances. And he's right there walking on the water. And he's right there. And he wants us to look to him. And what happened to Peter? Peter was looking at Jesus. And while he was looking at Jesus, he was walking on water. But as soon as he took his eyes off of Jesus, isn't that the same with us? Whether it's financially or for our health or our relationships in our family. I just got a text message before I came in here and said, hey, Pastor Tom, I want to let you know my dad is not doing good. Do you know what that's like when that happens? If we keep our eyes on Jesus, we know he's with us every step of the way, but we begin to see those things that surround us and we begin to seek. And that's exactly what happened to Peter. And Peter just said, Lord, save me. Doesn't take much to just recognize where you are in the moment. The problem is we miss so much because we never step out, because we want to stay in the safety of our boat. I read a book years ago when it first came out. John Ortberg actually wrote it. It says, if you want to walk on water, get out of the boat. It's a great book. I want you to read it. Go ahead and read it. But here's what I want you to understand. The truth of this is we don't all like risk. That was so confirming. Now, whether you raise your hand or not many people like risk. But I want you to understand that a few years back, a speaker by the name of Francis Chan. Now, whether you like him or not, that's not the point. He's a great speaker. He's a great author. I don't agree with everybody I've ever heard, and I've never agreed with everything I've ever said. That's a crazy thing. I go back and go, you said what? Were you like, never mind. But Francis Chan, in the video you're going to see in a moment, it's a little bit grainy. I mean, honestly, it's the best we could get of it, was a keynote speaker at a conference. And he begins to describe, and please don't miss it. Don't miss what he's beginning to try to get our attention with that goes along with our storyline today about I Dare You to Move. I want you to watch the video and don't miss what he's talking about when he talks about risk.
Off the team, whatever, there's so much instability, so much that we don't understand, that we don't know. For me, growing up, it was, a lot of you guys know my mom died giving birth to me. Then my dad remarried. Then my stepmom died in a car accident when I was 9. Then my dad got married again. Then my dad died of cancer when I was 12. And so I'm in junior high. My mom's dead. My stepmom's dead. My dad's dead. The only close relatives I had were my aunt and uncle, George and Sandra. And then when I was in high school, they got in a fight. And my uncle George shot and killed my aunt. And then stuck the gun to his own head. Killed himself. So I'm 16 years old, and this is life to me, going, man, what's next? Everything seems to be falling apart, and we get a little worried, we get a little scared. And this is what Christians do, they try to serve God, but then things get a little rocky, and things get a little unstable, and so we go, okay, that was nuts. I don't want to live like that. Let me hold on. And this is your routine. This is what so many people do. They go, you know what? I'm not going to try anything crazy. I'm just going to sit here, and I'm just going to hold on. And this is what you look like. You just go, this is what people do. You know what? I'm just going to have my nice little family. We're just going to, we're just going to keep to ourselves. We're going to live in a gated community. I'm going to homeschool my kids, make them wear helmets everywhere. I'm going to, I'm not going to let them outside because sun has bad rays. I'm going to, just on and on and on, and you just live your life in the safety of, I don't want to do anything crazy for God. I just want to, go to church on Sundays and maybe give like 2%, and maybe help the nursery because I feel guilty. And then you do this your whole life, and then you go, your greatest prayer is like, God, you know what? I would love to die in my sleep and not even feel it, and then just go up to heaven. And so you want to die like this. Just in your sleep, right in the middle of a dream, good dream, the dream you're going to heaven and you don't even feel it. And then suddenly you wake up, you stand before the judge and you go. Now, if, could you imagine watching the Olympics, And some girl does that, just gets up there, starts straddling the thing, and then steps off and goes. What is the judge supposed to do on the card? You see, and to me, I go, man, that's the routine that so many Christians are headed for. That's the routine, the boring, I do nothing crazy because I don't want to fall. That's the routine that they're going to live, and then one day it's going to be a shock because they're going to step off that balance beam and realize they're standing before the judge. They're standing before the judge, and you think he's going to look at that routine and go, wow, well done. Well done. You lived the safest life possible. You didn't slip, you didn't fall. See, that's not the life that God's called us to. That's where the majority will head, but I don't want to go where the majority goes.
Sometimes in our lives, we're actually gripping on so hard we don't realize that He's calling us. We're so involved in what we're doing, not what He's doing in us, through us, and with us. And I get it. He just kind of has a little fun with it. And don't get me wrong, you can live your life that way. If you are saved, by the shed blood of the Lord Jesus Christ, you're saved. And by the way, you're blessed. You're favored and you are loved. And if you don't let go of that balance beam, so to speak, in your life, and you just keep gripping, he's not going to love you any less or any more. And when you stand before him, the judge of all time, I got news for you. He's not going to look at you like, you loser. He's not. But don't we want to get to heaven and hear words, well done? Well done, thy good and faithful servant. You know, we're not just servants, so to speak. I understand that term is in there. He calls you a friend. It's an interesting thing because most Christians, and I want to ask you a question, I really want to get back into this and make sure that we finish it with the time that I'm allotted, but I want you to understand something. When you look at this, if we're not careful, we miss something. We miss something. This wasn't Jesus' idea. This was Peter's idea. Peter was the one that came up with this. The disciples all saw Jesus. Peter was the one that asked Jesus. What compelled Peter to actually ask that? It was God himself that confirmed it. It was Peter that said, if it's you, Lord, if it's you, let me come to you. Jesus just confirmed it. And he only said one word. I believe this is one of the biggest defining moments in Peter's life, and he's about to experience something perhaps like never before, and then go on to be used in an incredible fashion to even greater things. Why? Because an encounter with Jesus changes everything. So can I ask you a question? What's the if it's you that you'd like to ask Jesus? Where are you in the midst of your storm that you just want to cry out to Jesus, say, if it's you, Jesus, I want you to walk in and move with me and help me here. What area of your life is it your faith? Is it your relationships? Is it your career? Is it your finances? Is it a stronghold in your life? Whatever it may be brings us to really the last part of the story. I want to read something to you. It says this: immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. And listen to what he says, you of little faith. I like that statement. You said, some people would look at it and go, oh, he said he only had a little faith. Yeah, but he walked on water. How much faith does it take? He just told Peter, you of little faith. He said, why did you doubt? And he says, and when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, this is the Son of God. You see, Jesus wants to take us places we would never go on our own. And Jesus wants us to understand that there is no true greatness without the risk, but he also wants us to understand this. We can either step out on faith or we can cling in fear. We can either step out on faith or cling in fear, because the defining moment of this story is an invitation for Jesus to join him. And that's all Jesus is looking for. I was talking to my mentor this week, Bob Bingham, and I was telling him about the message. And I wish I could just get the words of it right, but he said, you know, Tom, what you're talking about is there is a remnant of God's people, followers of Jesus Christ. They're always right there. They're not perfect. He didn't say he was perfect, and God knows he knows I'm not perfect. He knows more about me than anybody else, more than about me than anybody else on the face of the earth. So he knows I'm not perfect. But he goes, Tom, how many do you really know that really, really love Jesus? He said, there's this small remnant. You got Mary and John and James. Now, some people would say Jesus had his favorites. No, he didn't have his favorites. Those people really wanted to be close to Jesus. Then there was the other disciples, and then you got the 150 or whatever, and then you got the 500. There's always people who say, I'm a follower of Jesus, but where are you in that mix? Are you following close? Do you hear his voice? Do you spend time with him? You say, I don't need to do that. That's the law. Well, I got news for you. Man, I want to spend time with Jesus in the morning. I want to talk to him. I want him to talk to me. I'm so far from it, sometimes I wonder if I'm even going to make it through the day. Man, God's honest truth, I've wanted to quit so much in my life. But I look at this and I can just see or feel the intensity of the moment. Are you kidding me? You're going to walk on water? By the way, I said it at the beginning. Water is not something God made that you're supposed to walk on. It's just not, whether it's windy or it's calm. It's just not any way, no way possible. But here's the question. Why did Peter step out of the comfort of the safety of the boat? And I was thinking about that. You know why? Because he knew Jesus. I'm not saying he just knew about him. He knew Jesus. He knew Jesus and who he was, and he knew who he was. Or I should say maybe wasn't, and needed Jesus to be able to step out of the comfort of the boat and the safety of the boat. You see, it's not because Peter was amazing, but it was because the one that said, come, is amazing. And that's Jesus Christ. You see, when Jesus said, Peter, you can do this, Peter's like, okay. And I'm here to tell you today, you can do anything God is telling you and inviting you to do. Here's something that I found very interesting when you read this, and I know you already saw this, but here, Peter chose to get out of the boat, but the 11 chose to stay in the boat. Look at those odds. I wonder if that's kind of where Christianity is today. How many people do you really know that love him and they're just full of passion for Jesus? I know a couple right now in my life. But here's another interesting fact. I had to ask myself this question this week. I says, out of the 12, which one really knew Jesus enough to say, if it's you, allow me to come? Don't miss it. 11 chose to stay in and cling, hanging on to fear. But the question here is this, so what represents your boat today? What are you clinging to for security and safety? Your finances, your big bank account? Because if you don't have a bank account, you're not clinging to that. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's an actual individual that gives you more encouragement than you get from anybody else, and you're clinging to that person for your value and your worth. Or maybe it's your person you're so confident in. I don't know what your boat is. I know that God's dealing with me. It's an image sometimes in all of our lives, but to follow Jesus, we must renounce the comfort as the ultimate value of our lives. And when God calls and says, hey, I want you to move, are you going to move? Are you going to step out of the boat? Or are you going to cling to the side and hang on? Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've been able to share together today. Thank you for your word. Powerful, powerful word. I'm thankful that you are the way, the truth, and the life. And Lord, I'm asking right now if there's anybody here under the sound of my voice in this service that needs to know right now that they need to step out of the boat of self-assurance and understand that they need Jesus first and foremost for salvation. Last week, Lord, we had a couple people that said, I trusted Jesus. And those are the ones that let us know. But perhaps there's somebody here right now, Lord, that needs you. So, Lord, I'm asking you with our heads bowed and our eyes closed, and if you're here today and if you need to trust Jesus Christ as your Lord and personal Savior, why don't you invite him into your life right there where you are right now? You said, Pastor Tom, how do I do that? With your heads bowed and eyes closed, let me word a prayer for you. And the prayer doesn't save you, but Jesus will. If you'll admit that you're a sinner and believe that Jesus Christ died upon the cross and confess with your mouth, he said he will save you. So why don't you just tell him right now, Lord, I know I'm a sinner. I believe you died upon a cross to save me for my sins. Come into my heart and save me. It's my desire to follow you and trust you. Perhaps you were seated here and said that for the very first time. We want to congratulate you and rejoice with you. And perhaps online while you're watching, you just prayed that prayer. In just a moment, we'll give you an opportunity to let us know. But I want to let you know this, that God is right there waiting for you to step out of your boat of security and safety and trust him. Father, thank you for leading in our lives. And Lord, help us. Help us to be a person right now that when we sing together this last song, peace, peace, that you'll move in all of our lives in Jesus' name.